Hello, friends. Why did Sparta win the battle against Athens but failed to maintain its dominance, while Athens, though a cultural powerhouse, eventually lost its power? How did Spartan discipline and rigid military structure contrast with the Athenian flexibility and democratic spirit? Why did Sparta leave behind simple, understated tombs, while Athens left us magnificent monuments and symbols of its cultural greatness? Today, we'll dive into the fascinating and harsh history of two great city-states, Sparta and Athens, comparing their triumphs, struggles, and legacies. Welcome to Boring History for Sleep, where we uncover the secrets of their lives, battles, and cultural heritage. Before we begin, please give a like if you enjoy my work and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new videos. In the comments, share where you're watching from and what time it is. I'd love to know who's joining us from all over the world. Dim the lights, relax, and let your worries fade. Ready? Let's dive in. Imagine yourself in the ancient world, surrounded by two of the most powerful city-states of Greece, Sparta and Athens. These two societies, both champions of their own unique ideals, were on a collision course that would shape the future of Greece. Sparta, known for its brutal discipline and military might, and Athens, a city of intellectual achievement and democratic ideals, were destined to clash in the most dramatic way possible. But what was it that made Sparta victorious in some respects, and Athens, despite its cultural brilliance, ultimately falter? It's a day in Sparta, the land of warriors. The sun is already high in the sky, casting long shadows across the barren hills of Laconia. You are a young Spartan boy, caught in the midst of the agoge, the rigorous training system that has been designed to shape you into a perfect warrior. From the moment you could walk, your life has been about survival, strength, and discipline. There is no room for weakness in Sparta. The very foundation of your society is built on the idea that only the strongest survive, and as a member of this city-state, your life is dedicated to one goal: protecting Sparta. You are not an individual. You are a cog in the machine that keeps this military society running. The sounds of clashing swords and shields ring through the air as you practice your fighting techniques with other boys your age. The harshness of your training is relentless, but it is precisely this cruelty that will transform you into a skilled warrior, ready to fight in the phalanx, a dense formation of soldiers marching in unison. To be a Spartan is to dedicate yourself entirely to the collective good of the city. Personal desires, comforts, and individuality are secondary. Every Spartan male, from the age of 7, is expected to undergo this transformation. The concept of weakness, of softness, has no place in this world. And as you train, you know that you are preparing for something much greater than yourself: to protect your people, to defend Sparta, and to maintain its place as one of the strongest military powers in Greece. But as you move through the harsh Spartan landscape, your mind begins to wander, thinking of another world, Athens, the city of culture, philosophy, and democracy. Imagine yourself in Athens now. The air is filled with the sound of public debates, the rustling of scrolls, and the hum of intellectual discourse. You are a citizen of this vibrant city, where the heart of your society is not the military but the mind. Here, you have the freedom to think, to speak, and to participate in the governance of the city-state. Athens is a beacon of intellectual achievement, its philosophers and playwrights shaping the very foundation of Western thought. The Agora is alive with the exchange of ideas, where Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle's teachings will one day influence generations to come. But the path to greatness in Athens is not without its challenges. Your democracy, though a shining example of freedom and public participation, is constantly at risk. There is always the question of how best to balance the needs of the individual with those of the collective. Your military, though competent, is nowhere near as disciplined or organized as the Spartan army. And yet you take pride in your ability to engage in debate, in your vibrant arts and theater, and in the way your society values knowledge and creativity over brute strength. Athens' glory lies not in its army, but in its ability to cultivate the mind. From the moment you could speak, your life has been one of learning, whether through philosophy, theater, or political participation. The future of Athens is built on its capacity to think beyond the immediate, and to question the very nature of existence. You believe in democracy, in the power of the people to shape their own future. But as you look around, you see that democracy has its flaws. Corruption runs deep, and political instability is a constant threat. What was once a beacon of cultural enlightenment is now slowly being consumed by its own internal divisions. The tragic flaws of Athenian society are becoming apparent: its obsession with empire, its expansionist ambitions, and the tendency of its citizens to prioritize personal gain over the greater good of the city. The contrasting lives of Spartans and Athenians couldn't be more different, yet both face immense challenges in maintaining their dominance. Sparta, with its relentless military discipline, finds itself torn between its desire to preserve its way of life and the burden of maintaining a strict social order. The harsh realities of Spartan life, the constant vigilance required to control the Helots, enslaved peoples who outnumbered the Spartans, are beginning to strain the very foundation of the city-state. The Spartan way of life, though powerful in war, has created a society that lacks the flexibility to adapt to changing times. The constant fear of rebellion from the Helots, the strict control of resources, and the isolationist policies make Sparta vulnerable to external threats and internal decay. Athens, on the other hand, has built its power on the idea of democracy, freedom, and intellectual achievement. But its thirst for expansion and its imperialistic policies, driven by the need to maintain and increase its wealth and influence, are beginning to take their toll. The power of the Athenian navy, once the pride of the city-state, is being stretched thin. The wars, the political infighting, and the overreach of Athens' ambitions have begun to unravel its once stable democracy. The tragic flaw of Athens lies in its inability to sustain its democratic ideals when faced with external pressures. The very system that made Athens great, the democratic system of open debate and participation, is beginning to falter under the weight of war and political division. And so, the stage is set for the ultimate conflict, the Peloponnesian War. Sparta, with its rigid military discipline, faces off against Athens, the champion of democracy and intellectual achievement. Both city-states, despite their differences, are fighting for their very survival. The war, fought for over a quarter of a century, will determine which of these two ideals, military supremacy or intellectual freedom, will emerge victorious. In the end, it is Sparta that wins the war. The disciplined, unyielding military prowess of the Spartans, combined with their strategic alliances, proves too much for Athens. Despite its cultural and intellectual superiority, Athens falters under the weight of its own hubris. The Athenians, once the proud champions of democracy, fall to the might of Sparta. But while Sparta may have won the war, it is Athens' cultural and intellectual legacy that endures. The ideas, the philosophy, the art, and the democracy of Athens will continue to shape Western civilization for centuries to come. In the aftermath of the war, both cities struggled to maintain their place in the world. Sparta's dominance is short-lived, as it becomes increasingly isolated and unable to adapt to the changing political landscape of Greece. Athens, though defeated, continues to influence the world through its art, philosophy, and political ideals. And though the story of these two great city-states may have ended in conflict, their legacies, one built on military might and discipline, the other on intellectual achievement and democracy, continue to resonate through history. You stand next to King Leonidas, your heart pounding in your chest. You know the odds. Persia's army is vast, their numbers nearly impossible to count. You and your 300 warriors are not just defending Sparta, you're fighting for the very idea of freedom itself. How did these few men, against all odds, become symbols of strength, courage, and sacrifice? And why did they choose to face certain death instead of bowing to the overwhelming Persian force? You tighten your grip on your shield, your eyes meeting Leonidas' steady gaze. His face is calm, unflinching. He knows what's at stake. The Persian Empire, under King Xerxes, is marching south, bent on conquering all of Greece. But Leonidas and his warriors stand ready to face them, no matter the cost. The battle that's about to unfold isn't just a military confrontation, it's the ultimate test of willpower, the ultimate display of Spartan discipline and loyalty. This is not about victory, but about sending a message: Sparta will never bow. The air is thick with tension as Leonidas issues his orders. You and the other soldiers are ready. Every moment of your life has prepared you for this. The harsh training, the sacrifices, the stripped-down, relentless Spartan lifestyle, all of it has led to this moment. You know that even if you die here today, your name, and the name of Sparta, will live on. This is more than just a battle. This is your legacy, your chance to defend the very soul of your people. The battle rages on. The Persian forces, though countless, are no match for the strategic genius of Leonidas and his soldiers. You stand firm, shoulder to shoulder, a perfect unit. The clash of shields and the cries of warriors fill the air, but nothing can shake the unity of your phalanx. But the unthinkable happens. The Persians outflank the position, and all seems lost. Leonidas and his warriors make their final stand, fighting until the very last breath. Their sacrifice, though brutal and bloody, is remembered for centuries, becoming a symbol of unshakable resolve. Leonidas' story is one of the ultimate defiance, a reminder that, sometimes, even in the face of impossible odds, courage and sacrifice are all that matter. Now, imagine yourself in Athens, a world away from the dust and blood of Thermopylae. The air here hums with ideas, with debates, with the exchange of thoughts that will shape the very future of the world. This is not a world where warriors are trained for battle from the age of 7. Instead, you are surrounded by philosophers, artists, and politicians. And at the heart of it all stands Pericles, a man whose vision, ideas, and leadership are about to turn Athens into the shining beacon of democracy, culture, and intellectual achievement. Pericles is a man who believes in the power of the people, the strength of democracy, and the need for Athens to rise above all other city-states, not through the sheer power of its military, but through the brilliance of its intellect and cultural prowess. You walk the streets of Athens, and everywhere you go, you can feel the pulse of a city on the brink of greatness. The Parthenon rises above you, a symbol of what is possible when intellect, art, and politics come together. But Pericles' greatest challenge is not just to lead Athens into greatness, it's to make sure it stays there, even as war looms on the horizon. Under Pericles' guidance, Athens thrives. It becomes the epicenter of the Greek world, culturally, intellectually, and politically. This is a city that celebrates philosophy, democracy, and the arts. You can hear the voices of the great philosophers, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, echoing through the streets as they debate, discuss, and inspire. And yet, even as Athens grows in wealth and prestige, Pericles knows that the city's true test is yet to come. Athens is not just a city of ideas, it's a city that must also stand strong against its enemies. But while the Spartans are hardened by decades of warfare, Athens must fight to protect its ideals. The tension grows as Athens and Sparta begin to edge closer to the inevitable conflict, the Peloponnesian War. Pericles leads Athens with brilliance and vision, but even his genius can prevent the forces of war and political turmoil from tearing the city apart. And though Pericles holds Athens together for a time, his death, caused by a devastating plague, marks the beginning of the end for the city's golden age. The world that Pericles built, one based on the ideals of democracy, intellectual freedom, and cultural achievement, begins to unravel, and Athens is never quite the same again. But while Leonidas' death is defined by sacrifice and military valor, Pericles' death is a reminder that even the greatest minds can't stop the tide of time. Their paths may have been different, but both men shared one thing: they shaped the fates of their cities, not through force alone, but through the strength of their vision. Leonidas' story is one of ultimate sacrifice for the defense of his people, his city, and his values. His courage at Thermopylae is a shining example of Spartan strength and resilience, a warrior's dedication to the ideal of duty above all. Pericles, however, left behind a different kind of legacy. He built an Athens that celebrated thought, art, and democracy. He sought to create a society where the mind and the spirit could flourish as much as the body. But ultimately, both leaders' cities faced their own downfall: Sparta's decline after its military victories, and Athens' decay after its cultural and political peak. In the end, it wasn't just their military prowess or intellectual genius that defined them. It was their ability to leave a mark on history, to lead with vision, even when the world around them was uncertain. Leonidas' sacrifice and Pericles' wisdom are still remembered today. They are the pillars upon which their societies stand, even centuries after their deaths. The streets of ancient Greece are filled with whispers, rumors, and strange happenings. A cold wind blows through the narrow alleys of Sparta, carrying with it the weight of secrets kept by the Spartan warriors, the mysterious cryptia. And in Athens, a democracy that prides itself on openness and freedom hides its own dark practice, the ritual of ostracism. What were these enigmatic customs, and why did two of the most powerful city-states of ancient Greece, Sparta and Athens, use such strange, secretive methods to maintain control over their citizens? In Sparta, the cryptia was something no outsider could ever truly understand. Picture yourself in the eerie, moonlit forests of Laconia, surrounded by the harsh silence of the night. You are a young Spartan warrior, chosen to participate in one of the most feared rituals in all of Greece, the cryptia. It is said that only the strongest and most loyal Spartans are ever selected for this grim task. As part of the cryptia, you are sent out into the night to patrol the countryside, tasked with hunting down the helots, those enslaved people who serve the Spartans and vastly outnumber them. But this is not a hunt for sport. it's a hunt for control, for dominance, and for terror. The Cryptia was more than just a rite of passage. It was a method of control, an expression of Spartan supremacy over their helots. In the darkness, you stalk your prey, the sound of your footsteps muffled by the damp earth beneath your sandals. The men chosen for this secretive task were expected to strike fear into the hearts of the helots. They would ambush, kill, and leave their victims in the woods as a reminder of the Spartan state's power. In this brutal practice, the goal was clear: keep the helots in constant fear, ensure they never rebel, and maintain Spartan dominance at all costs. It was a society ruled by discipline, but also one defined by fear. As a participant in the Cryptia, your mind is clouded with conflicting emotions: pride in serving Sparta, but also the weight of the violence you're compelled to carry out. The Spartan way was harsh, demanding complete loyalty and sacrifice, but how much would you, as a warrior, be willing to give to maintain this system of brutal control? The Cryptia isn't just a test of strength, it's a test of loyalty to a system that has stripped away everything human about those it seeks to control. This dark tradition existed because Sparta's entire foundation was built on maintaining an iron grip on its society. The fear of the helots revolting against their Spartan masters was constant, and so, in the shadows, the Cryptia was born. The need to eliminate any hint of rebellion among the subjugated masses became a key part of Spartan identity. In this brutal world, the only way to ensure stability was through fear, through ritualized, cold-blooded violence. As you return from your hunt, your heart heavy with the night's actions, you realize that your society does not tolerate weakness. And in Sparta, strength is all that matters. Meanwhile, in Athens, a completely different kind of control plays out in the public squares. Athens is the cradle of democracy, a place where every citizen has the right to speak, to vote, and to participate in the governance of the city-state. Yet lurking behind this democratic ideal was a practice so powerful, so terrifying, that it could silence even the most prominent figures in Athenian society: ostracism. Imagine this: you are an Athenian citizen, walking into the agora, the political heart of Athens, to participate in the ritual that will determine the fate of one of your fellow citizens. The people gather in the public space, each holding a shard of pottery, an ostracon, on which they will write the name of someone they believe threatens the democratic ideals of the city. It's a strange custom, and one that is shrouded in the very spirit of Athenian democracy: the right of the people to decide who stays and who goes. If a politician, a general, or a leader grows too powerful or too unpopular, the people can vote to banish them from Athens for 10 years. But it's not just about power, it's about fear. You look around at the faces of your fellow citizens, their eyes filled with suspicion. In the frenzy of politics, one wrong move could lead to exile. The practice of ostracism, though ostensibly meant to protect Athens from tyranny, often devolved into something else: a tool of political manipulation, a way to eliminate rivals or silence voices that challenged the status quo. It wasn't just about preventing tyranny, it was about controlling who could rise to power, who could hold sway over the people. The ritual itself is unsettling. Citizens take their turn at the ballot, casting their votes in secret, writing down the name of the person they wish to see banished. At the end of the vote, if a person's name appears on enough ostracons, they are exiled. Just like that, out of the city for a decade. It's a public act, but it is also a deeply personal one. The person chosen isn't guilty of a crime. They are simply a target of the collective will, a victim of Athens' fear of losing control. Ostracism becomes a political weapon, one that could silence voices, tear apart friendships, and tear at the very fabric of Athenian democracy. Now imagine, for a moment, that it is your name that is written on those shards of pottery. Your fate is no longer in your hands. You have been condemned by the people, a symbol of the dangers of political ambition or the consequences of discontent. The Athenians, so proud of their democracy, have used this very tool to enforce conformity and eliminate those they deemed threats. It is a cruel irony that the very democracy that grants freedom of speech also holds the power to exile its own citizens. Even the most celebrated of leaders, like the general Themistocles, were not immune to ostracism. This tool of public expulsion shows that no one, no matter how great their achievements, is safe from the fickle will of the people. As you reflect on these two practices, Sparta's Cryptia and Athens' ostracism, two different approaches to control emerge. Sparta, through the violent and secretive Cryptia, controls through fear and violence, creating an atmosphere where rebellion is impossible, but the cost is the humanity of those who enforce this control. Athens, on the other hand, uses the ideal of democracy to control its citizens, manipulating the very system meant to empower them. It's a city where political ambition is constantly at risk, where no one can feel entirely safe, and where the people themselves are both the rulers and the judge. These practices may seem worlds apart, yet they share a common theme. Both cities, despite their differences, relied on methods of control that kept their people in line, that instilled fear, and that ensured stability at the cost of individual freedom. Sparta and Athens, in their own ways, show us that even in the most advanced civilizations, control and power are often maintained through methods of fear, exclusion, and violence. You stand in the bustling heart of Athens, surrounded by the chatter of the agora, the buzz of political debate, and the faint sound of music coming from the nearby symposia. The wealthy aristocrats of the city glide by in fine robes, their faces a mix of pride and calm, knowing that their influence in Athens extends far beyond their fortunes. You can hear their names whispered in awe or disdain, men who have earned their status through land, wealth, and social connections, but above all, through their ability to manipulate the political system for their benefit. In contrast, imagine yourself in the rugged, sun-scorched plains of Sparta, where the air is thick with the scent of sweat and iron. The city is silent save for the sharp clink of weapons as Spartan warriors, trained from birth, prepare for battle. Here, the ruler you might encounter is a king, but not the kind of king you might expect. Spartan kings are warriors first, rulers second. Their power doesn't come from wealth or lineage alone, but from their prowess in battle and their unwavering commitment to the Spartan way of life, strength, discipline, and unity. Their rule is born of divine right, military success, and the trust placed in them by the warriors who fight and die by their side. This is the heart of Sparta, a place where kings rule with an iron fist, not in palaces of luxury, but among the disciplined ranks of soldiers. These kings are not distant figures in the courts, surrounded by advisors. They are part of the battle. When war calls, Spartan kings lead their men into the fray, and their strength and bravery in combat are what earn them respect. Their power isn't about wealth, it's about sacrifice, discipline, and loyalty. In Sparta, the king does not sit comfortably on a throne. He fights alongside his people, sharing the same hardships, the same risks. In fact, their very survival hinges on the might of their warriors, and the king is one of them, just another soldier in the eyes of the Spartans. Yet, as you think about this, a question lingers in your mind. What makes these kings so different from the aristocrats of Athens? What does it mean to rule in Sparta, and how does it compare to the way power is wielded in Athens, a city where power isn't defined by military might, but by the mastery of words, the manipulation of wealth, and the influence that money and aristocracy afford? Now, shift your focus to Athens, where the idea of power takes on an entirely different form. Here, aristocracy reigns not through the sword, but through the strength of social status and wealth. In Athens, the aristocrats don't have to fight to command power. Their influence is already built into the very fabric of society. These men live lives of luxury, surrounded by splendid homes, feasts, and intellectual pursuits. Their power lies not in their ability to lead soldiers into battle, but in their ability to sway public opinion, to buy influence, and to manage the delicate balance between democracy and aristocracy. As an Athenian aristocrat, you have access to a world of privilege. Your wealth secures your place in the political arena, where decisions about the city-state's future are made. The political landscape in Athens is governed by democratic ideals, but these aristocrats know how to pull the strings behind the scenes, using their resources and social connections to ensure that their voices are the ones heard. While everyone technically has a say in Athenian democracy, it is the aristocrats who set the agenda, shaping the decisions that affect the future of Athens. They dine with philosophers, lead the city's cultural and intellectual initiatives, and ensure that their power remains secure in the face of the ever-changing tides of Athenian politics. Here, the ideal of democracy is a carefully curated image. Behind the public debates and the grand speeches of the Democratic Assembly, it is the aristocrats who hold the true power. Their wealth allows them to control the political machinery, their status gives them influence, and their connections within the intellectual circles shape the cultural identity of Athens. They are not warriors like the Spartans. Their battles are fought in the realm of words, strategy, and negotiation. Yet in their world, their ability to manipulate the system, to control the flow of power and influence, is the truest form of dominance. But as we begin to see, the very differences between Spartan kings and Athenian aristocrats reveal the core of what each society values. In Sparta, kings are defined by their ability to lead in battle, by their toughness, by their ability to endure pain and loss for the sake of the state. Spartan kings are not only political leaders, they are warriors, soldiers, and leaders in the truest sense. Their rule is bound up in the idea of service and sacrifice, and their very survival depends on their connection to their warriors. Their lives are marked by hardship, and their power is earned through the blood, sweat, and tears of their people. A Spartan king does not inherit his power in the same way an Athenian aristocrat inherits wealth. He earns it, each battle, each campaign, each decision that risks his life and the lives of his people. In Athens, the aristocrat's power is far more subtle. It is about the manipulation of the system, about using wealth and influence to secure a place at the top of society. Athens is a city of culture, intellect, and commerce, and its aristocrats dominate not through brute force, but through strategic planning, wealth accumulation, and political savvy. They are not defined by physical strength or the ability to fight in battle. Instead, their power lies in their ability to play the game of politics, to use their connections and resources to steer the city-state in the direction that benefits them most. Their life is one of luxury, but with that luxury comes a need to maintain the facade of democracy while pulling the strings of true power from behind the scenes. So, when we look at these two groups, the Spartan kings and the Athenian aristocrats, it's clear that the nature of power in each society could not be more different. In Sparta, power is earned through physical strength, sacrifice, and loyalty to the state. It is earned in the battlefield, in the shared hardships of war, and in the deep, unwavering bond between king and soldier. In Athens, power is inherited and maintained through wealth, connections, and intellectual influence. It is a world where words have as much weight as swords, where the battle is for influence and control, not for territory or physical survival. As you stand between these two worlds, Sparta's rigorous kingship and Athens' intricate aristocracy, you realize that the ultimate question of power is not about who is the strongest or who is the wealthiest, but who can maintain their grip on society's most valuable resources. Whether through war or words, whether through physical prowess or intellectual manipulation, the struggle for dominance in these two ancient city-states is a reminder of the many ways power can be wielded, and the many ways it can ultimately shape the fate of entire civilizations. You're a young child, no older than 7, and the future of your life is already decided. The city-state of Sparta, known for its warrior culture, prepares to mold you into the epitome of physical and mental strength. Today marks the beginning of your training in the agoge, the brutal, unforgiving education system that will shape every aspect of your life. From this moment, you will know no softness, no comfort. Everything, from the food you eat to the way you sleep, will be designed to prepare you for one thing: war. The moment the training begins, it's clear this will not be a normal childhood. You are stripped of your comforts and forced to embrace discipline. You will sleep on hard wooden boards, given just enough food to survive but never enough to feel satisfied. Your days will consist of grueling exercises designed to make you stronger, faster, and tougher. You will learn to fight, to endure pain, and most importantly, to obey orders without question. Your life will no longer be yours. It will belong to Sparta, to its needs, and to its unrelenting drive for military supremacy. Picture yourself now, standing in the thick of the agoge, practicing the art of war. You run through obstacle courses, lifting heavy stones, and learning to wield the spear and shield. The trainers, hardened warriors themselves, watch you closely, offering no praise and little mercy. Failure is not an option, because in Sparta, weakness is the greatest sin. Each day, your body becomes stronger, more agile, more disciplined. You are being transformed into the ultimate warrior, one who can fight and die for Sparta without hesitation. But this training doesn't just build your body, it builds your mind. Every lesson, every hardship you face, is meant to forge the will of a Spartan. You will learn the importance of unity, for a Spartan warrior does not fight for himself, he fights for his city-state. And when you leave the agoge, you will be a part of a collective force, a brotherhood of warriors who will fight side by side until the very end. Loyalty is the highest virtue, and the price of disobedience is death. But now let's shift focus. Imagine that you are a young Athenian boy or girl, living in a very different world. The environment is far from the strict, militaristic Spartan system. Here, the atmosphere is open, filled with the sounds of conversation and debate. Your education, instead of being centered on physical prowess, focuses on the mind. You attend a school where the goal is to prepare you for citizenship, to make you an active participant in Athenian democracy. You enter your classroom, and it's clear that this is a world where ideas matter more than strength. Your lessons aren't about how to fight or endure hardships. They are about learning to think, to speak, and to reason. You will study the great thinkers of Athens, Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. Your future will be shaped by your ability to debate, to analyze, and to persuade others. You will learn rhetoric, music, philosophy, and mathematics, everything that makes an Athenian not just a citizen of a city, but a thinker in the truest sense. As a student in Athens, your education isn't just about preparing you for a role in society, it's about becoming part of something greater. The very structure of Athens, its democracy, its politics, its culture, requires that every citizen be an informed participant. You will spend hours in the agora, listening to debates, forming your own opinions, and perhaps even arguing for your point of view. In Athens, your power lies not in your ability to fight, but in your ability to speak. Your education aims to cultivate these skills, because it's through dialogue, discussion, and persuasion that an Athenian rises to prominence. But while your education is intellectually stimulating, the system of education in Athens is not without its flaws. The very democracy that makes Athenian life so vibrant also brings tensions. Political factions often clash, and the focus on individual rights sometimes overshadows the collective good. Your intellectual prowess will earn you a place among Athens' elite, but your journey is not just about learning, it's also about surviving the cutthroat world of Athenian politics. To be an Athenian citizen is to constantly balance personal achievement with public duty, knowledge with power. Now, consider these two paths, two very different systems of education, both designed to prepare the next generation for the challenges their respective societies will face. In Sparta, the Agoge turns children into warriors, strong in body, mind, and spirit. Every lesson, every hardship, is designed to ensure that Sparta's warriors will be the most disciplined and fearless on the battlefield. In Athens, the education system nurtures the mind, teaching young people to think critically, to question the world around them, and to participate in the democratic process that defines their society. The contrast is striking. In Sparta, the future of the city-state is based on strength and military supremacy. The Agoge leaves no room for weakness. There is only discipline, obedience, and loyalty. In Athens, the focus is on freedom of thought, democracy, and intellectual development. The educational system is built on the belief that the mind, not the body, is the greatest tool a citizen can have. Yet both systems have their flaws. Sparta's narrow focus on military might create a society that is strong but limited. Its warriors may be unmatched in battle, but they lack the intellectual flexibility needed to adapt to changing circumstances. Athens, while a hub of culture and democracy, often struggles with political instability, and its focus on intellectual achievement doesn't always translate into practical solutions for the city's real-world problems. As you step back and think about these two systems, you realize how each society shaped its future based on its values. Sparta's Agoge produces warriors who are fierce and loyal, but it comes at the cost of individuality. Athens' education system produces thinkers, philosophers, and politicians, but it sometimes fails to create the unity needed to preserve the city-state's power in times of crisis. Both societies have their strengths and weaknesses. Both paths offer valuable lessons, but they also come with significant costs. In the end, the Spartan and Athenian systems of education show us the two sides of human nature, one that values physical strength and unity, the other that values intellectual freedom and democracy. Each society, shaped by its education system, leaves behind a legacy that reflects its ideals, its strengths, and its vulnerabilities. The battle between these two educational philosophies will echo throughout history, leaving us to ponder what truly defines greatness. Is it the strength of the body, or the power of the mind? The wind howls across the dusty plains of Marathon, the air thick with tension. You are an Athenian hoplite, one of the soldiers who will stand against the might of the Persian Empire. Across from you, the Persians, led by King Darius, form a massive, nearly overwhelming line of soldiers. They have already swept through Asia Minor, and now they march toward the heart of Greece. If they succeed, the entire Greek world could fall under Persian rule. The weight of history presses down on you. The fate of your city, your people, and perhaps all of Greece rests on this one battle. But the question is, can a small force of Athenians, with no cavalry and no experience in large-scale battles, defeat the mighty Persian army? The day before the battle, the air in Athens was thick with uncertainty. Word had come that the Persians were coming, and the city was in a panic. Yet, the Athenian leaders made a bold decision. They would not wait for the Persians to come to Athens. They would meet them at Marathon, a plain just outside the city, and fight for the future of their homeland. The army, though smaller than the Persian force, is united, driven by the belief that their freedom is worth defending at all costs. As you prepare for battle, The memory of past Persian invasions and the stories of Greek heroism flood your mind. You feel the surge of pride that only comes from standing alongside your fellow citizens, ready to defend your freedom. The battle begins at dawn. The Persian army moves forward, confident in their numbers. But the Athenians have something the Persians don't: the element of surprise. Under the leadership of the general Miltiades, the Athenians engage in a brilliant strategy, attacking the Persians in the center and surrounding them with superior speed and agility. The Persian forces, unprepared for the ferocity of the Athenian attack, are driven back. For the first time in history, a Greek army, outnumbered and lacking the resources of the mighty Persian Empire, wins a decisive victory. As you stand in the aftermath, your chest heaving, sweat mixing with the dust of battle, you realize the magnitude of the victory. Against all odds, the Athenians have triumphed. The Persian threat is momentarily repelled, and Athens, along with the rest of Greece, is safe, for now. The Battle of Marathon will go down in history as one of the most significant military victories of all time, a testament to the courage, strategy, and unity of the Greek city-states. But while the victory at Marathon secured Athens' future for the moment, the Persian threat was far from over. The empire, though stunned by the loss, would return. And the next time they did, the stakes would be even higher. Fast forward a decade, and now imagine yourself as a Spartan hoplite at the Battle of Plataea, one of the final battles in the Persian Wars. The year is 479 BC, and the Persian Empire, under Xerxes, has once again come south to invade Greece, still reeling from their defeat at Marathon. This time, however, the Greeks are united like never before. Sparta, Athens, and the other city-states have formed an alliance, determined to stop the Persian Empire once and for all. You are part of the Spartan force, perhaps the most elite of all Greek warriors, standing at the front of the line. The ground beneath your feet is firm, the air filled with the sounds of preparation, the clink of armor, the sharpening of spears. You are ready. The Persian army before you is still massive, but now, you stand with the might of all Greece behind you. The unity of the Greek forces, each one determined to protect their way of life, is the key to your strength. As the battle begins, the atmosphere is thick with tension. The Persians, who had once overrun Greece with ease, now find themselves confronted by a united force. The Greek army, especially the Spartans, with their discipline and superior training, holds their ground and slowly pushes the Persian forces back. Despite their numerical superiority, the Persians cannot match the unity, the strength, and the resilience of the Greek hoplites. The ground shakes with the clash of shields and swords, but through it all, you feel an overwhelming sense of pride. This is the moment where Greece will stand or fall. And Greece will stand. By the end of the day, the Persian army has been utterly defeated. The Battle of Plataea is the final blow to Persia's hopes of conquering Greece. The alliance between the Greek city-states has proven to be stronger than any single empire, and the Greeks have secured their freedom and future. The Battle of Plataea marks the end of the Persian Wars and is a turning point in the history of Greece. It shows the power of unity, of people from different city-states coming together for a common cause, to protect their land, their culture, and their freedom. As a Spartan warrior, standing in the aftermath of the battle, you feel the weight of history upon your shoulders. The war is over, and Greece has won. But you also understand that the peace secured by these victories is fragile, and the future will always hold new threats. Yet for now, the Greek world is safe. The Persian Empire, which once seemed unstoppable, is finally repelled from Greece. Looking back at both of these legendary battles, Marathon and Plataea, you see that the thread that connects them is not just the victories themselves, but what they represent. At Marathon, the Greek city-states, with their limited resources and smaller numbers, were able to defeat a much larger and more powerful enemy. It was a victory of strategy, unity, and determination. At Plataea, the Greek forces stood together as one, and through that unity, they were able to defeat the Persians once and for all. These two battles, one on the plains of Marathon and the other on the fields of Plataea, mark the triumph of Greek resilience, strategy, and unity. They show us that sometimes, the might of an empire is no match for the strength of a united people fighting for their homes, their families, and their way of life. These victories, these moments of glory, are what allowed the Greek city-states to flourish and to lay the groundwork for the civilization that would shape the future of the Western world. Imagine standing in the center of the ancient world. Two of its most powerful city-states, Sparta and Athens, are at their height. But beneath their might and glory, there lies an unspoken connection, the divine. Both cities, though so different in their cultures and values, looked to the gods for guidance, and both sought answers in the same mysterious realm, the realm of oracles. But how does an oracle, a source of divine power, impact the lives of these two cities, each so committed to its own ideals? In Sparta, the role of the oracle is as austere and rigid as the city itself. You stand before the famous oracle of Delphi, where the priestess Pythia sits, shrouded in mystery. The air is thick with incense as the prophetess communes with the god Apollo, delivering cryptic messages that will guide Spartan rulers and warriors. But unlike the open-ended prophecies that might shape the actions of other Greeks, in Sparta, these oracles are seen as direct commands from the gods, commands that must be followed without question. You are a Spartan king, leading your people through an era of relentless military expansion. The people look to you for guidance, but it is not your wisdom that matters most, it is your ability to interpret the divine will. As you stand before the oracle, awaiting her response to a critical decision, whether to go to war or wait, you know the weight of the gods' favor or wrath hangs over your shoulders. The oracle will provide you with a vision of the future, but it will be up to you, as king, to interpret it in the harsh, black and white terms of Spartan law. There is no room for doubt. The gods have spoken, and to question their will is to risk the wrath of the divine. For the Spartans, the oracle is not just a source of spiritual guidance, it is a tool of control. Every decision, from military strategies to political appointments, is guided by the interpretation of the oracle's words. The Spartan kings are not mere rulers, they are intermediaries between the gods and their people. This is a society that lives and dies by divine approval. When Leonidas led the Spartans to their heroic death at Thermopylae, it was under the guidance of the oracle of Delphi, its cryptic prophecy setting the stage for the sacrifice that would define Sparta's legacy. The oracle's voice, though often vague and enigmatic, is interpreted with absolute certainty, ensuring that the Spartan way of life remains unyielding, governed by divine will. Now, shift to Athens, where oracles take on a completely different role, less about direct commands, and more about philosophical exploration. Here, the oracle of Delphi is not about rigid obedience, but about shaping the course of a society built on ideas, democracy, and intellectual freedom. You are an Athenian leader, standing before the same oracle, yet your approach is worlds apart from that of the Spartan kings. Athens, with its focus on reason and discourse, does not look to the oracle as the final word in decision-making. Instead, it seeks guidance, sometimes literal, sometimes symbolic, but always with the understanding that the answer will be woven into the fabric of a larger dialogue about the future of the city-state. Athenians visit the oracle, not just for predictions of war or political fortune, but for guidance on larger matters, the fates of their citizens, the future of democracy, and even philosophical questions that puzzle the greatest minds of the day. Unlike Sparta, where the oracle's word is a divine mandate, Athens views the oracle as one voice in a larger conversation. It is part of a democratic process that seeks wisdom from many sources, debates, counsel, and yes, even the gods. But Athens' relationship with the oracle is also complicated. Unlike Sparta's unquestioning obedience, the Athenians are more likely to debate, challenge, and even reinterpret what the oracle says. The advice given by the oracle of Delphi could be seen as a starting point for discussion rather than a final decree. In fact, many in Athens would argue that their greatest leaders, such as Pericles, didn't necessarily rely on the oracle's words alone to guide them. They used the oracles as one of many tools to make decisions, weighing them against reason, philosophy, and the will of the people. This more intellectual and democratic approach to the divine creates a striking contrast to Sparta's rigid system. Athens embraces ambiguity and intellectual debate, even when faced with the direct guidance of the gods. It is a city that believes in the power of human judgment, even in the face of divine prophecy. While Sparta's kings are bound to the will of the oracle, Athens' leaders, although respectful of the gods, are not afraid to challenge divine advice in favor of democratic principles or military strategy. Yet, despite these differences, both cities find power in their oracles. For the Spartans, the oracle is a weapon of certainty and control, one that ensures unity and discipline. For the Athenians, it is a more subtle tool of reflection, a means of navigating the complex world of politics, philosophy, and leadership. In the end, both cities are shaped by the divine, but in drastically different ways. The role of the oracle in each society reveals the heart of what makes Sparta and Athens so unique. Sparta, a city that values control, discipline, and military supremacy, uses the oracle to reinforce its rigid structure. Athens, a city built on intellectual inquiry, debate, and democracy, uses the oracle as just one voice in the chorus of ideas that shape its future. These contrasting approaches, one rooted in divine command, the other in democratic interpretation, define the very essence of what makes these two great city-states stand apart. And yet, despite their differences, both cities share a deep connection to the divine. In Sparta, the gods dictate the fate of the people. In Athens, the gods provide a glimpse into the unknown, but it is the people who ultimately shape the future. As you reflect on this, you realize that the ancient Greeks, whether in the rigid discipline of Sparta or the intellectual freedom of Athens, found meaning in the words of the oracle. The divine may have spoken, but it was the people, warriors and thinkers alike, who chose how to interpret those words, and in doing so, shaped the course of history. The sun is low over the fields of Messenia, where the lives of the Helots, enslaved people in Sparta, are shaped by a brutal, unyielding existence. You are a Helot, bound to the land, forced to toil endlessly under the watchful eye of your Spartan masters. You live in fear, not just of physical punishment, but of the constant threat of violence from the Spartan warriors. Your life, though essential to the functioning of the Spartan state, is one of submission and suffering, with little hope for freedom. Your every action is dictated by the needs of the Spartans, your humanity erased by the cold grip of slavery. This is the reality of being a Helot in Sparta. The Helots, captured during the conquest of Messenia, are the backbone of Spartan society, doing all the agricultural labor so that the Spartan citizens can devote themselves entirely to military training and war. However, despite their essential role in keeping Sparta running, Helots are not seen as people. They are tools, necessary for the Spartan way of life, but expendable. The relationship between Helots and their Spartan masters is defined by fear, oppression, and constant tension. You live in a state of near constant oppression. While the Spartans train and prepare for battle, you work the land, day in and day out, often facing cruelty at the hands of your masters. You are not free to move, to speak, or to even take joy in the few fleeting moments of rest you are allowed. Instead, you are controlled, monitored, and often punished if you do anything that might be seen as a challenge to the system. And yet, within you, a spark of rebellion sometimes flickers. The sheer cruelty of your existence makes you wonder, how long before the Helots rise up and overthrow their masters? But your fear of punishment keeps you in check. The Spartans, though few in number, maintain control over the Helots through terror. The Cryptia, the secret Spartan police force, is tasked with hunting down any sign of rebellion, and it is not uncommon for Helots to disappear in the night, their bodies discarded to send a message to others. The power imbalance is absolute. The Spartans may be few, but they rule through absolute authority and violence. And for you, there is no escape, no chance of freedom unless you risk everything. Now contrast this with the world of Athens, where slavery takes on a different form. In Athens, slaves are not tied to the land as they are in Sparta. Instead, many slaves are captured from distant lands, Thrace, Asia Minor, or other parts of the Mediterranean, and brought to work in the homes, mines, or workshops of the wealthy. You are an Athenian slave, tasked with performing the daily labor necessary to sustain the lives of your masters. Your life is hard, but it is not as brutal as that of the Helots. You may serve in the homes of the elite, cleaning, cooking, or caring for their children. Or perhaps you work in the mines, extracting silver that will fund the grand public works of the city. Slaves in Athens, unlike the Helots in Sparta, are often allowed to live somewhat more freely. But that freedom is an illusion. No matter where you serve, you are still a slave. You have no political rights, no personal freedom, and no control over your fate. You are the property of your master, and at any time, you could be sold or punished for disobedience. Even if you are allowed to marry or own property, it is always under the watchful eye of your master, who holds the power to revoke those rights at will. Your life is a constant struggle for dignity and respect, and though you may have some relative freedom compared to the Helots, you are always aware of your place in society, at the bottom. Athens, with all its glory as a beacon of democracy and intellectual achievement, relies on the labor of its slaves to keep its society running. Without them, the grandeur of the city, its temples, its public works, and even its democratic institutions, would crumble. Slaves are the unseen backbone of Athenian wealth, and yet they are entirely excluded from the democratic system. They cannot vote, they cannot own property, and they are at the mercy of their masters. And yet, despite this, you, as an Athenian slave, may find some solace in the fact that your fate is not bound to the harsh oppression of the land as the Helots are. You may live in the city, with access to some level of social interaction, and perhaps even form some bonds with other slaves. But your life is still one of submission. The life of a slave in Athens, though less violent than that of a helot, is still one of hardship and suffering. Yet, for all the differences in how these two societies treat their slaves, one thing is clear: their lives are defined by their lack of power, by their inability to shape their own futures. In Sparta, the helots are bound to the land, subject to a brutal and unrelenting system of control. In Athens, the slaves may have more mobility, but they are still the property of the wealthy, their lives dictated by the whims of their masters. So, what does this tell us about the societies of Sparta and Athens? The stark difference in how they treat their enslaved people reveals the very essence of their cultures. Sparta, with its focus on military dominance, relies on the helots to fuel its war machine, yet maintains absolute control over them through fear and oppression. Athens, with its focus on intellectual achievement and democracy, cannot exist without the labor of its slaves, yet chooses to conceal them from the public eye, pretending that the greatness of the city is achieved solely by its free citizens. But in both cases, there is a disturbing truth: the prosperity of both cities is built on the backs of those who have no voice, no rights, and no power. Whether it's the helots in Sparta, subjugated by their masters and treated like cattle, or the slaves in Athens, hidden behind the walls of the grand homes of the wealthy, both cities owe their greatness to the suffering of those who are kept in chains. The question we must ask is this: what does this say about the values of Sparta and Athens? In the pursuit of greatness, both cities have sacrificed the humanity of those they oppressed. And in doing so, they have built their legacies on the backs of the very people who were most invisible to them. The lives of the helots and slaves may have been different, but their fate was the same: they were tools to be used, not people to be respected. And in the end, their stories, too, are part of the history of Sparta and Athens, even if they were never fully told. The wind blows through the rugged plains of Sparta, carrying with it the scent of wild herbs and the sound of children's laughter. But this is no ordinary childhood. You, as a Spartan girl, have been raised to be something extraordinary. Your upbringing, though drastically different from your peers in other Greek city-states, is focused on strength, resilience, and independence. Unlike the typical life of a Greek woman, who is confined to domestic duties, you are trained to be strong, physically and mentally, so that you may contribute to Sparta's military success, even if it is from the sidelines. As a Spartan woman, your role in society is vital. You may not fight in the battles yourself, but you are expected to produce and raise strong warriors who will. You are trained to exercise, to run, to wrestle, and to be as physically capable as any man in Sparta. While other Greek women are confined to their homes, managing households, you are encouraged to be outdoors, to push yourself, and to prepare for the difficult task of raising sons who will grow up to be warriors. The Spartan ideal of physical perfection is not limited to men. Women, too, are expected to uphold the image of strength and health. Your future is not defined by marriage and motherhood alone, but by your ability to support Sparta's militaristic culture. This starkly contrasts with the typical life of an Athenian woman. As an Athenian woman, your life is not spent in the public sphere. You are expected to remain inside the home, overseeing domestic duties, including weaving, spinning, and managing the household. Your value in Athens is primarily seen through your role as a wife and mother, helping to maintain the household, while your husband, the head of the household, takes care of the public affairs. You are excluded from the political sphere. Your opinions are not considered in the democratic processes that define Athens. Athens is a city built on intellectualism, public debate, and civic involvement, but none of that applies to you. You are not allowed to speak in the assembly, vote, or hold public office. Your life is confined to the domestic realm, even as the men of your society are hailed as great philosophers, politicians, and military leaders. But what does this reveal about the two contrasting cultures? Spartan women, despite the tough, demanding system they live in, are given a certain level of freedom and respect that is unimaginable in Athens. While their primary function is still centered around producing warriors, they are not seen as weak or passive. In fact, they are essential to Sparta's military system. Without strong, healthy Spartan women, there would be no future generations of warriors. Spartan women are expected to maintain their health, take part in physical training, and even manage the household in their husband's absence, as Spartan men spend much of their lives away from home, training, or at war. The Spartan ideal of a strong woman is not one based on beauty or grace, but on strength and endurance. Spartan women have more autonomy than their Athenian counterparts, able to move freely in society, manage their own estates, and hold some degree of authority within their household. They are taught to be proud of their strength and independence, values deeply ingrained in the Spartan ethos. In fact, Spartan women were even given the right to own property, which was unheard of in most other Greek city-states. The idea was that they were the backbone of Sparta's warrior class, ensuring that the bloodline of Spartan warriors would continue uninterrupted. And while the primary focus of their lives was the military, Spartan women were respected for their contributions to Sparta's survival and strength. In Athens, however, women were expected to maintain a different role entirely, one that was far more restricted and focused on domesticity. Although Athenian society was seen as a center of culture, philosophy, and democracy, these ideals were reserved for men. Women were tasked with keeping the home in order, raising children, and weaving the fabric of daily life, but they had little to no say in the grand matters of society. The idea of a woman participating in the intellectual and political debates that characterized Athenian public life was almost unheard of. Athenian women were confined to their homes, and their voices were not considered important in the development of the city-state. Even their education was limited. While boys were educated to become citizens who could speak in the assembly, girls were typically taught only domestic skills. Athenian women, although respected as wives and mothers, were viewed as subordinate to their husbands and fathers. Their primary role was to raise sons who would grow up to participate in Athenian democracy and public life, but their own participation in that life was strictly limited. Women could not vote, could not serve in office, and were rarely ever seen in public spaces beyond the home, the temple, or private gatherings. They lived lives of relative seclusion, with their world expanding no further than the household. Yet, despite these significant differences, both Spartan and Athenian women shared common burdens. Both were expected to marry and bear children, their lives centered around the family and the stability of their city-state. Both faced societal pressures that defined their worth in terms of their ability to bear sons and support their husbands. But where Spartan women were given physical autonomy and a certain amount of freedom in public life, Athenian women lived more isolated lives, confined to the private, domestic sphere. In the end, the lives of Spartan women and Athenian women offer two contrasting views of gender roles in ancient Greece. Spartan women were trained to be strong, resilient, and independent, tasked with ensuring the survival of the Spartan warrior class. Athenian women, while respected in their roles as mothers and wives, were excluded from the public sphere, their lives centered around the home and family, with little say in the intellectual, cultural, or political life of their city-state. These two cities, with their contrasting approaches to women's roles, reflect the very different values that shape their societies. And as you reflect on this, you realize how much the lives of these women were shaped by the values of their respective city-states. In Sparta, strength and sacrifice were the defining ideals, and women were integral to maintaining these values. In Athens, democracy, intellectualism, and public life were the focus, but women's roles remained confined to the private domain. Yet, despite these differences, both societies were built on the belief that women had an important, though distinct, role to play in the survival of their civilization. Imagine the air thick with anticipation, the land divided. The clash of two great powers, the disciplined Spartans and the democratic Athenians, is about to unfold in one of the most brutal and defining conflicts in Greek history. The Peloponnesian War. A war that will change the face of Greece forever. You stand at the edge of Athens, watching as the once thriving city-state is plunged into war. The streets, usually filled with philosophers, playwrights, and politicians, are now flooded with soldiers. You can feel the tension in the air, thick with uncertainty. This is not just a military conflict, it is a war for the soul of Athens, and for the future of Greece itself. This is a war between two entirely different systems: Athens, the beacon of democracy and intellectualism, and Sparta, the epitome of military discipline and austerity. But as the conflict begins, you sense that something will shift. The nature of this war will not be as straightforward as it first appears. The Peloponnesian War is a series of battles, but it's also an ideological war. The battle will be fought not just on the plains, but within the very hearts of the two societies. The first turning point comes when Athens, under Pericles' leadership, adopts a strategy of avoiding direct confrontation with the Spartans. Pericles, the great statesman, understands that Athens' strength lies not in military might, but in its navy and its ability to trade, to gather wealth, and to inspire its allies. Athens relies on its formidable naval fleet to outmaneuver the Spartan forces, avoiding pitched battles on land. Pericles' strategy is clear: draw the Spartans into a war of attrition, where the resources and power of Athens can outlast the Spartan might. The citizens of Athens retreat behind their walls, relying on their navy and their allies to keep the flow of supplies and reinforcements coming. But this strategy, while smart in theory, comes at a cost. Soon after the war begins, disaster strikes Athens. The city is struck by plague, and the devastation it causes is beyond anyone's imagining. The very heart of Athens is shaken. Pericles himself, the guiding intellect of Athens, succumbs to the disease. The city, already under siege, now faces internal disarray. With Pericles dead, the leadership of Athens falters. The democratic ideals that once defined Athens are now in jeopardy, and factions begin to rise within the city, each one seeking to claim power. The plague, which decimates the population, has a psychological impact too. Athens, once a proud beacon of civilization, is suddenly vulnerable, weakened by both disease and political instability. On the other side, Sparta, although victorious on the battlefield, has its own set of challenges. The militaristic society of Sparta has always been its strength, but it is also its weakness. Sparta is a society built on the idea of unflinching discipline, strength, and unity, but the prolonged conflict begins to take its toll. The Spartan warriors are elite fighters, but the war's protracted nature strains the city-state's resources. As the war drags on, Sparta struggles to maintain its alliances with the Peloponnesian League, which grows increasingly disillusioned with the endless fighting. The war takes an unexpected turn when Sparta, desperate to break the stalemate, forms an unlikely alliance with Persia. This is a moment that will have far-reaching consequences. Sparta, whose philosophy has always centered around self-sufficiency, now turns to a foreign power to bolster its position in the war. Persia provides Sparta with financial support, allowing it to build a navy to rival Athens and to force Athens into a series of decisive naval battles. The most critical of these battles is the Battle of Aegospotami in 405 BC. Sparta, now armed with Persian funds and support, decisively defeats the Athenian navy, cutting off Athens' vital supply routes and effectively starving the city into submission. The victory at Aegospotami is the moment that seals the fate of Athens in the war. Athens, once the dominant power in Greece, is now on the brink of collapse. The turning point here isn't just a military defeat, it's the fall of a great democracy, once a shining example of intellectual, cultural, and political achievement. With its navy destroyed and its citizens starving, Athens has no choice but to surrender to Sparta. The democratic ideals that once defined Athens' identity are shattered, replaced by the harsh reality of defeat. The war has taken a devastating toll on the soul of Athens. But Sparta's victory is short-lived. While the Spartans are successful in defeating Athens, the very system they relied on to win the war, military discipline and unity, begins to crumble. Sparta's dominance is not one of cultural vibrancy or intellectual achievement, it is one of military might. And without the unity of the Peloponnesian League, which had been sustained by the shared goal of defeating Athens, Sparta faces its own decline. The very systems that had been Sparta's greatest strength, the harsh militaristic training, the rigid social structures, begin to fracture under the weight of prolonged war. The Peloponnesian War, and its key turning points, revealed deep flaws in both societies. Athens, with all its intellectual brilliance, could not withstand the toll of war and internal division. Sparta, with all its military might, could not sustain itself without the cultural and intellectual flexibility that Athens had. The war ends with the fall of Athens and the temporary rise of Spartan power, but it's a hollow victory. The war leaves Greece fractured, exhausted, and vulnerable to future conflict. The glory of Athens is diminished, and the pride of Sparta begins to wane as the consequences of the war unfold. In the end, the Peloponnesian War teaches us that strength alone, whether military might or intellectual achievement, cannot ensure survival. The war leaves both Athens and Sparta weakened, their once proud legacies stained by the brutality of conflict. The war is a brutal reminder that even the greatest civilizations can fall when internal divisions, unchecked ambitions, and unchecked power collide. Imagine this: the clink of metal against metal, the smell of simple food cooking over a fire, and the sounds of men speaking in low voices, sharing their stories. You're in a Spartan mess hall, a humble, austere place that reflects the very essence of Spartan society. Here, there is no luxury, no extravagance. Instead, the focus is on unity, strength, and survival. This is where the Spartan warriors come together, eating simple meals, talking strategy, and bonding over shared hardships. Everything in Sparta is about sacrifice, discipline, and the collective good. Even the act of eating is a ritual that underscores the harshness of Spartan life. You sit among your fellow warriors, your bowl filled with a basic sparse meal, perhaps some barley, a bit of meat, and a hard, unappealing bread. There is no fine wine here, no delicacies or feasts. The food is meant only to nourish the body, to prepare you for the next battle. You eat quickly, with no time for indulgence, because Spartan life is not about enjoyment, it is about survival. The mess hall serves as a reminder of this, that the warrior must remain focused on the mission, never distracted by personal comfort. The camaraderie shared here, however, is essential. It builds bonds between soldiers, solidifying their loyalty and their readiness to fight and die for one another. In this simple, utilitarian setting, there is no room for indulgence or luxury. The food you eat is not meant to please your palate but to fuel you for battle. And even the way you sit and eat is designed to reinforce Spartan discipline. There is no excess, no celebration. You eat as a group, and everything is designed to reinforce the idea that you are part of something greater than yourself, the Spartan army, which exists solely for the preservation of Sparta's power and way of life. The Spartan mess hall is not just a place to eat, it is a place where warriors are forged, where unity and discipline are upheld. Now, imagine the contrast. You are in Athens, sitting in a grand symposium, surrounded by the sights, sounds, and smells of luxury and intellectual discussion. Here, the focus is on culture, debate, and indulgence. The symposium is a gathering of the elite, wealthy men, philosophers, and artists, all coming together to drink, eat, and discuss matters of politics, art, philosophy, and life. Unlike the Spartan mess hall, where food is a means to an end, in Athens, the symposium is an event, a celebration of knowledge, camaraderie, and the good life. The food is rich, the wine flows freely, and the conversation never stops. You recline on your cushions, a cup of wine in hand, surrounded by men who, like you, have achieved high status in Athenian society. The atmosphere is relaxed, but the intellectual energy in the room is palpable. The discussions are deep, ranging from the latest political debates to philosophical musings on the nature of justice, beauty, and the cosmos. The symposium is a place for the exchange of ideas, where intellectual prowess is as important as social status. Unlike the Spartan mess hall, where conversation is practical and focused on the immediate needs of survival, the Athenian symposium is a place for leisurely, yet profound, conversation. The Athenian symposium is not just about eating and drinking, it is a space where the elite of society come together to forge connections, to strengthen alliances, and to engage in the intellectual life of the city. The meals are luxurious. Roasts, bread, olives, and exotic fruits are served. The wine is rich and flows freely, and the conversations are as much about entertainment as they are about education. You listen to the great minds of Athens discuss the latest theories on ethics, democracy, and the human soul. It is a space for the expression of Athenian values, freedom of thought, intellectual pursuit, and the belief that the mind is the most important asset a citizen can possess. While the Spartan mess hall is a place of unity and discipline, the Athenian symposium is a place of indulgence and intellectual exploration. The contrast between the two could not be more striking. In Sparta, the mess hall is where warriors bond over simple food, where strength and loyalty are reinforced through shared meals. In Athens, the symposium is a gathering of the intellectual elite, where ideas, art, and philosophy are celebrated over luxurious meals and endless wine. Both, however, are vital to the societies they represent. The Spartan mess hall upholds the Spartan ideal of unity and military prowess, while the Athenian symposium celebrates the freedom to think, to debate, and to explore the depths of human knowledge. The symposium is a reflection of Athenian values. It is a celebration of culture, of democracy, and of the belief that the highest pursuit in life is intellectual achievement. The Spartan mess hall, in contrast, reflects the Spartan commitment to discipline, physical strength, and the collective good. The men who gather in these spaces, one to eat and prepare for battle, the other to drink, debate, and celebrate, are the embodiment of their societies. The mess hall and the symposium, though so different in form, serve as microcosms of Sparta and Athens themselves. Yet, despite the differences in their approach to food, culture, and social life, both Sparta and Athens understood the importance of communal bonding. For the Spartans, the mess hall is a place to forge unbreakable bonds between warriors, ensuring that they fight as one. For the Athenians, the symposium is a place to create alliances, to share ideas, and to strengthen the intellectual and political fabric of the city. Both are essential to the societies they support, and both play a role in shaping the course of history. As you reflect on these two worlds, one where food and drink fuel the body for war, the other where meals foster discussion and creativity, you begin to see that food and the ways people gather around it are not just about nourishment. They are reflections of the values that shape society, the priorities that define a civilization, and the ways in which cultures come together, or apart. The Spartan mess hall and the Athenian symposium are not just places of eating, they are symbols of two vastly different worlds, each one built on its own set of ideals. Two towering figures in the ancient Greek world, each shaping the fate of their respective city-states through law and governance. In one corner you have Lycurgus, the legendary lawgiver of Sparta, whose reforms established the harsh, militaristic society that Sparta would become. In the other corner you have Solon, the reformer of Athens, whose laws laid the groundwork for Athenian democracy and helped steer the city-state away from tyranny. These two men, though separated by centuries, are linked by their impact on Greek society. But the question that arises is, how did their laws shape the destinies of their cities, and what can we learn from their contrasting visions of governance? Let's begin in Sparta, the epitome of military discipline and austerity. Lycurgus, a semi-mythical figure, is credited with transforming Sparta into the military powerhouse it became. His laws were not just a set of rules, they were a complete reorganization of Spartan life, designed to make the city-state the most fearsome force in Greece. As you walk through the austere streets of Sparta, you begin to understand the nature of these reforms. The Spartan society, under Lycurgus, is built on the principles of discipline, equality, among the citizens, and collective welfare. His laws were aimed at stripping away personal wealth, personal ambition, and individuality in favor of a communal lifestyle focused on military readiness. The most significant of Lycurgus' reforms was the establishment of the agoge, the brutal military training system that every Spartan male would undergo. From a young age, boys were taken from their families and placed in this rigorous system, where they would be taught to endure hardship, survive on limited food, and fight with precision and unity. Every Spartan citizen, regardless of his personal wealth or status, was subjected to the same training, reinforcing the Spartan ideal of equality within the warrior class. This was a society where the collective good came first, and personal desires and comforts were secondary. It was, in essence, a warrior society where every individual was molded to be part of the machine that kept Sparta at the top. But Lycurgus didn't just shape the military aspect of Sparta. His reforms affected every corner of society. The land was redistributed so that every citizen had an equal share, eliminating the vast wealth disparities that existed in other Greek city-states. The economy was built on equality, not luxury, and citizens were forbidden to accumulate excessive wealth. Public meals, shared by all citizens in communal dining halls, called syssitia, reinforced the idea of unity and equality. The laws also forbade the Spartans from engaging in trade or industry, focusing their energies solely on maintaining a military society. While Lycurgus' reforms made Sparta strong, they also made it rigid, unable to adapt to changing times. The Spartan system, despite its early successes, eventually became unsustainable. Sparta's emphasis on military strength over intellectual development, and its refusal to innovate left the city vulnerable when external threats and internal problems arose. Lycurgus' laws created a society built for war, but not one built for peace or intellectual growth. The Spartan ideal, though impressive, could only last as long as the city's military superiority, which eventually waned. Now, let's turn to Athens, where the story of governance is far more dynamic. Solon, a wise and respected statesman, took on the monumental task of reforming Athens during a time of intense political instability. Athens, at the time, was teetering on the edge of tyranny. The rich aristocrats controlled the land, and the poor were sinking deeper into debt, even to the point of slavery. There was a growing sense of injustice among the lower classes, and Athens was on the brink of civil war. Solon, as a lawgiver, was called upon to address these disparities. What Solon did was nothing short of revolutionary for the time. He abolished debt slavery, which had trapped many Athenians in servitude to the wealthy, and enacted economic reforms that redistributed land more equitably. He also introduced the idea of timocracy, a system in which political rights were tied to wealth but not exclusively controlled by the aristocracy. Under Solon's reforms, more Athenians had a say in how the city-state was governed, laying the groundwork for the democratic system that would later be developed. Unlike Lycurgus, who built a rigid system that focused on equality in terms of military readiness, Solon created a system that focused on fairness and opportunity for all citizens, allowing for more flexibility and growth. Solon's legal reforms also focused on justice and fairness. He created a new set of laws that were more accessible to the average citizen, ensuring that laws were not simply the tools of the powerful but were fair and transparent. He also established the concept of written laws, making it clear that no individual, no matter their status, was above the law. Through these reforms, Solon moved Athens away from the rule of the aristocrats and towards a society where individual rights and freedoms were respected, at least to some degree. However, while Solon's reforms helped to create the foundations of Athenian democracy, they were not without their flaws. Solon's system was still unequal. Wealthy citizens still had greater political influence, and the poorest citizens were still excluded from many aspects of political life. But Solon's reforms were a starting point for something much larger, something that would evolve into the democracy that Athens became famous for. His vision of a society where the laws governed the powerful as much as the powerless became the bedrock upon which future democratic ideals would be built. When you compare Lycurgus' Spartan system and Solon's Athenian reforms, the differences are stark. Lycurgus sought to create a society where the focus was on military readiness and unity, where the state controlled every aspect of life. His laws produced a society that was incredibly strong militarily but lacked the intellectual and cultural flexibility that would allow it to thrive in peacetime. Solon, on the other hand, sought to create a more just and equitable society, where laws were designed to provide opportunities for all citizens, not just the rich and powerful. His reforms created the foundation for Athenian democracy, where freedom of speech, participation in government, and the rights of individuals were central to society. In the end, Lycurgus' Spartan laws were a product of the city-state's need for military dominance, while Solon's laws were a product of Athens' desire for fairness and political inclusion. Both men shaped their societies in profound ways, but their visions of governance could not have been more different. Where Lycurgus sought to create unity through military discipline and sacrifice, Solon sought to create a society where fairness, justice, and opportunity could flourish. As we look back on their legacies, we see that these two lawgivers, though operating under vastly different circumstances and ideologies, were both fundamental in shaping the future of their city-states. The contrast between Sparta's rigid military structure and Athens' more fluid, inclusive democracy is a reflection of their respective laws and governance, and it serves as a reminder of how deeply the values of a society are tied to the laws that govern it. As the night wraps its tranquil embrace around us, we turn our focus to the cultural practices that were central to the identities of Sparta and Athens. Though both city-states valued tradition and ritual, the nature of their cultural expressions differed significantly, reflecting the contrasting ideals that defined their societies. In Sparta, festivals were primarily military-oriented, celebrating strength, endurance, and the power of the state. In Athens, however, the focus shifted toward the arts, intellectual pursuits, and public entertainment, with the theater playing a central role in the cultural life of the city. Imagine yourself in the austere, disciplined world of Sparta, where religious festivals were not just celebrations but reaffirmations of the military virtues that were the backbone of Spartan society. Spartan festivals, such as the Hyacinthia and the Carnea, were deeply connected to religious rites and the worship of gods, especially Apollo and Artemis. These festivals often involved rituals that celebrated the unity and strength of the Spartan people, as well as commemorating past victories in battle or honoring fallen warriors. The Hyacinthia, for example, was a festival that marked the mourning and eventual celebration of the life of Hyacinthus, a beloved youth killed by the god Apollo. It was both a time of sorrow and joy, a festival that reinforced the Spartan values of discipline, sacrifice, and collective memory. The Carnea was another significant Spartan festival, dedicated to Apollo, and it was closely tied to military readiness. During the Carnea, the Spartan army would pause its training and participate in sacred rituals, which included sacrifices, songs, and dances. These rituals were not merely religious. They served as a reminder of the importance of martial readiness. The festival also marked a temporary halt in military campaigns, symbolizing the unity of the Spartan people in peace as well as in war. These festivals were a time for Spartans to gather and renew their commitment to the state and its military objectives. Unlike the intellectual and artistic pursuits that defined Athens, Spartan festivals were about reaffirming the social order and the militaristic ethos that held Sparta together. The role of the gods was central, but the focus was always on maintaining Spartan identity through ritual and collective participation. The Spartan festivals, though often marked by religious devotion, were primarily a reinforcement of the values that defined Spartan life: physical strength, unity, and military supremacy. In contrast, imagine yourself in Athens, where the festival dedicated to Dionysus, known as the city Dionysia, is in full swing. This celebration, held in honor of the god of wine, fertility, and theater, was one of the most important events in Athenian life, attracting citizens from all over the city and even visitors from other Greek city-states. The city Dionysia was a time of revelry, but it was also a time of deep reflection on the human condition, societal issues, and the role of the gods in everyday life. The city Dionysia was a festival that blended religious devotion with artistic expression. It featured dramatic performances, particularly tragedies and comedies, and it was the occasion for the debut of many of the greatest works in Western theater. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides presented their new plays during the festival, and these performances were not just entertainment. They were a way for Athenians to engage with the complexities of human nature, politics, and morality. The themes explored in these plays often reflected the tensions and struggles that defined Athenian society, such as the balance between democracy and tyranny, the role of the individual in the state, and the power of the gods in shaping human fate. The dramatic performances at the city Dionysia were more than just artistic exhibitions. They were a reflection of the intellectual and cultural life of Athens. The festival provided a space for citizens to come together, not only to enjoy the spectacle of theater but also to engage in discussions about the ideas and issues raised in the plays. The theater was a place where Athenians could explore the deepest questions of existence, about justice, power, love, and the nature of the divine, while also celebrating their civic pride and cultural achievements. Unlike the Spartan festivals, which focused on religious devotion and military readiness, the Athenian theater was an expression of the city's intellectual and democratic spirit. The plays performed at the city Dionysia often critiqued the very foundations of Athenian society, challenging the audience to reflect on the nature of their city-state, its values, and its future. The theater was a space for critical thought, public dialogue, and civic engagement, where issues of morality, justice, and governance were explored through the lens of drama. As we compare the festivals of Sparta and Athens, the differences between the two cities become even more apparent. Spartan festivals were centered around reinforcing the values of military discipline, unity, and devotion to the state. These festivals were designed to remind Spartans of their roles as warriors and to celebrate the strength and power of Sparta. The religious rites, though significant, were deeply tied to the military and the social order that defined Spartan life. Athenian festivals, particularly the city Dionysia, on the other hand, were an opportunity to celebrate intellectual achievement, artistic expression, and democratic ideals. The theater played a central role in Athenian culture, offering a space for citizens to explore complex ideas, question societal norms, and engage in public discourse. The emphasis on drama and public participation in Athens highlights the city's commitment to democracy, where the arts were seen not just as entertainment, but as a vital part of civic life and intellectual inquiry. While Sparta's festivals were marked by their austerity and focus on military values, Athens' festivals were marked by their celebration of art, culture, and the exploration of the human condition. The contrast between these two forms of celebration reflects the broader differences between the two societies: Sparta, with its focus on strength and discipline, and Athens, with its focus on intellectual and artistic achievement. In the end, both Spartan and Athenian festivals played a crucial role in shaping the identities of their respective city-states. While Sparta's festivals reinforced the city's military might and unity, Athens' festivals celebrated the city's intellectual, cultural, and democratic achievements. These contrasting practices reveal the values that each society held dear and provide a glimpse into the ways in which both Sparta and Athens sought to define themselves, both in times of peace and in times of war. As we continue our journey through the contrasting worlds of Sparta and Athens, we now turn our attention to the two most powerful military forces in ancient Greece, the Spartan army and the Athenian navy. Both were formidable in their own right, but their structures, training, and strategies were shaped by the unique priorities and values of each city-state. The Spartan military was a symbol of strength, discipline, while the Athenian navy was a symbol of naval innovation, strategic brilliance, and flexibility. Together, these two military forces defined the course of the Peloponnesian War and the fate of Greece itself. Imagine yourself as a young Spartan warrior, standing in the midst of a battlefield, fully clad in your bronze armor and carrying your shield and spear. The Spartan military, known for its professionalism, rigor, and efficiency, is unlike any other military force in the ancient world. From a young age, you have been trained in the agoge, the brutal military education system designed to turn you into an elite warrior capable of withstanding the harshest conditions. Your life has been dedicated to one goal: the defense of Sparta. You are a hoplite, part of the heavily armored infantry that forms the backbone of the Spartan army. In battle, you fight in close formation with your fellow soldiers, shoulder to shoulder, moving as a single unit. The phalanx, the tightly packed line of hoplites, is the most effective fighting formation in ancient warfare, and the Spartans are masters of its use. Spartan soldiers are trained to endure physical hardship, to fight with precision, and to obey their commanders without question. The military ethos of Sparta permeates every aspect of life, from the food you eat to the training you undergo. The Spartan army is a professional force, built on the idea of unity and discipline, where the individual is subordinate to the needs of the state. You are not a soldier for personal glory or wealth, but for the survival of Sparta itself. Every soldier, from the youngest recruit to the oldest veteran, plays a vital role in maintaining the strength of the city-state. The Spartan army is organized and efficient, with its commanders selected from the ranks of the elite warriors, who have proven themselves in battle. The focus of the Spartan military is on land warfare, where the strength of the hoplite phalanx is unmatched. Sparta's military reputation is built on its land forces, which are feared and respected throughout Greece. The city-state's entire way of life is centered around maintaining a strong military, and every citizen is trained to be a warrior from childhood. The Spartan army is the embodiment of the military ideals of the city-state: strength, unity, and discipline. In stark contrast, imagine yourself as an Athenian sailor, standing on the deck of a sleek trireme, ready for battle. While Sparta's military focus was on land warfare, Athens' strength lay in its navy. The Athenian navy was the most powerful in the ancient world, and it was the key to Athens' dominance in the Mediterranean. Unlike the heavily armored hoplites of Sparta, the Athenian sailors were lighter and more agile, trained for speed and maneuverability. The trireme, the swift and agile warship of the Athenians, was the backbone of the fleet. Each trireme was rowed by a crew of skilled sailors, who worked in unison to propel the ship at incredible speeds. The power of the Athenian navy lay in its ability to strike quickly, using tactics such as ramming enemy ships with the bronze-covered prow of the trireme. The Athenian navy was central to the city-state's strategy, especially during the Peloponnesian War. Athens had a vast and well-equipped fleet, and its naval power allowed it to control the seas, protect its trade routes, and project power throughout the Mediterranean. Unlike the Spartans, who relied on their land-based military prowess, the Athenians were masters of naval warfare. They were skilled at using their fleet to carry out surprise attacks, raids, and blockades, and they employed innovative tactics to defeat their enemies. One of the defining moments in the history of the Athenian navy came during the Battle of Salamis in 480 BC. The Persian Empire, under King Xerxes, had invaded Greece, and the Persian fleet was poised to crush the Greek forces. The Athenians, under the leadership of Themistocles, used their superior knowledge of naval warfare to outmaneuver the much larger Persian fleet. The Greeks lured the Persians into the narrow straits of Salamis, where their smaller, more maneuverable ships could outflank the Persian vessels. The result was a resounding Greek victory that turned the tide of the war and secured the survival of Greece. This battle showcased the ingenuity and effectiveness of the Athenian navy, which played a central role in Greece's eventual victory over Persia. Unlike the Spartan army, which focused on rigid discipline and physical strength, the Athenian navy was characterized by its flexibility and adaptability. Athens sailors were trained to work together in tight formations, using speed and precision to outmaneuver and overwhelm their enemies. The Athenian navy was a reflection of the city-state's values: innovation, intelligence, and strategic thinking. While Sparta's strength lay in its rigid military discipline and land-based combat, Athens' power came from its ability to control the seas, project power through its fleet, and outthink its enemies. As we compare the Spartan military and the Athenian navy, the differences between these two forces become strikingly clear. The Spartan army was a model of military discipline, unity, and strength. Every Spartan soldier was trained to be part of a cohesive unit, where personal desires were subordinated to the needs of the state. The Spartan military was focused on land warfare, where the strength of the hoplite phalanx was unmatched. In contrast, the Athenian navy was a symbol of flexibility, innovation, and strategic brilliance. The Athenians relied on their superior naval power to dominate the seas, using tactics such as surprise, speed, and maneuverability to defeat their enemies. While Sparta's military might was based on discipline, endurance, and unity, Athens' naval power was built on intelligence, innovation, and the ability to adapt to changing circumstances. The contrast between the two forces reflects the broader differences between the two city-states. Sparta, with its focus on military prowess and rigid social structure, and Athens, with its emphasis on intellectual achievement, democratic ideals, and strategic thinking. Ultimately, both the Spartan army and the Athenian navy played crucial roles in the history of Greece. The Spartan military was a symbol of strength, discipline, and unity, while the Athenian navy was a symbol of innovation, strategy, and flexibility. These two forces, though different in many ways, were both vital to the survival and success of their respective city-states. The legacy of these military forces continues to resonate today, as symbols of two very different approaches to power, warfare, and society. As the quiet night deepens, we now turn our focus to the decline and eventual fall of two of the most powerful city-states in ancient Greece, Sparta and Athens. Both of these mighty powers, once the epitome of military might, intellectual achievement, and cultural supremacy, ultimately succumbed to internal strife, external pressures, and the passing of time. The stories of their falls are as much about their strengths as they are about their weaknesses, revealing the complex interplay of power, governance, and fate. Imagine yourself in the aftermath of the Peloponnesian War, where Sparta, having achieved victory over Athens, stands at the height of its military power. Sparta's victory in the war was a triumph of discipline and military prowess. It was a testament to the Spartan way of life, uncompromising, rigorous, and focused on the collective good. Yet, despite its military success, Sparta was not prepared for the long-term consequences of its victory. Sparta's power was built on a fragile foundation, one that relied heavily on its military might and the control of the Helot population, the enslaved people who worked the land. After the war, Sparta attempted to extend its dominance over Greece, but it faced multiple challenges. One of the major reasons for Sparta's eventual downfall was its rigid social structure. The Spartan society, though highly efficient in wartime, was not flexible enough to adapt to changing circumstances. The Spartan kings and elites were focused primarily on maintaining their military superiority and adhering to traditional values. However, this left little room for economic innovation or cultural development. Sparta's reliance on the Helots, who outnumbered the Spartans, created a constant source of instability. Spartan society lived in fear of Helot uprisings, which led to a system of repression and brutality. The Spartan warriors, though formidable in battle, were isolated from the broader cultural and economic trends of the time. Sparta's lack of intellectual and economic dynamism meant that it was ill-equipped to deal with the challenges posed by its enemies and the changing nature of warfare. Sparta's decline was hastened by the Battle of Leuctra in 371 BC, where the Thebans, led by Epaminondas, defeated the Spartan army decisively. This defeat shattered the myth of Spartan invincibility and exposed the vulnerabilities of the Spartan military system. The Battle of Leuctra marked the beginning of Sparta's gradual decline. Though Sparta would continue to exist as a city-state for several centuries, its military dominance was never restored. The rigid, insular nature of Spartan society, combined with its over-reliance on military conquest, led to its inability to adapt to the changing political and military landscape of Greece. By the time of the rise of Macedon under Philip II and Alexander the Great, Sparta had already lost much of its former power and influence. In contrast, the fall of Athens came not from an external military defeat, but from the internal collapse of its democratic ideals and political system. Athens, having emerged as the intellectual and cultural center of the ancient world, faced its own challenges in the wake of the Peloponnesian War. The war, while devastating to Athens, also revealed the vulnerabilities in Athenian democracy. The democratic system that had once been a source of strength became a source of weakness. The internal strife, political instability, and factionalism that characterized Athens after the war weakened the city-state from within. Leaders like Pericles, who had guided Athens to its golden age, were gone, and the city's political system became increasingly chaotic. The defeat of Athens in the Peloponnesian War had lasting consequences for its political and social order. The democratic system that had been the pride of Athens became dysfunctional and corrupt. The oligarchic coups, such as the rule of the 30 tyrants in 404 BC, highlighted the fragility of Athenian democracy. These political upheavals, combined with the economic strain of the war, caused widespread disillusionment among the Athenian people. The very system that had allowed Athens to flourish, its democracy, was now contributing to its downfall. Athens' decline was further exacerbated by the rise of Macedon under Philip II and his son Alexander the Great. In 338 BC, the Battle of Chaeronea saw the combined forces of Athens and Thebes defeated by the Macedonian army. This battle marked the end of Athenian independence and the beginning of Macedonian hegemony over Greece. Though Athens would continue to exist as a cultural center, its political power was permanently diminished. The glory of Athens, once the shining beacon of democracy, philosophy, and art, was eclipsed by the military might and political genius of Macedon. The fall of Athens was not merely the result of military defeat, it was the consequence of the city's failure to preserve its democratic ideals and adapt to the changing political realities of the time. Athens, with its emphasis on intellectual achievement and cultural supremacy, had neglected the need for a strong and stable political system. The city's inability to balance its democratic ideals with the practical demands of governance led to its decline, and by the time of Alexander's conquest, Athens was no longer the dominant force it had once been. As we reflect on the fall of Sparta and Athens, the contrasts between the two cities become even more pronounced. Sparta, with its focus on military strength and rigid social structure, ultimately failed because it could not adapt to the changing political and economic realities of the ancient world. Its reliance on conquest and military dominance proved to be unsustainable, and its rigid social hierarchy created internal instability. Athens, on the other hand, collapsed not due to a lack of military power, but because its democratic ideals and political system became fractured and weakened from within. Athens' cultural and intellectual achievements were not enough to preserve its political stability, and its failure to adapt to the demands of the changing world led to its fall. Both cities, in their rise and fall, embody the strengths and weaknesses of their respective systems. Sparta's downfall was a result of its inability to evolve beyond its militaristic roots, while Athens' decline came from the internal divisions and instability that plagued its democratic system. The stories of their falls serve as a reminder of the fragile nature of power and the importance of balance and adaptability in the face of changing circumstances. In the end, both Sparta and Athens left lasting legacies, but their ultimate declines serve as cautionary tales about the dangers of rigidity, internal conflict, and the failure to evolve. Their stories are woven into the fabric of Greek history, and the lessons learned from their rises and falls continue to resonate today. As the stars twinkle above, we turn our gaze to another crucial contrast between Sparta and Athens: their approach to foreign relations, culture, and interaction with the outside world. This contrast between Spartan isolation and Athenian openness reveals much about the different ways these two great city-states viewed themselves and their place in the world. Sparta, with its rigid focus on military supremacy, sought to preserve its way of life by remaining largely insular, while Athens embraced the idea of openness, fostering trade, cultural exchange, and intellectual engagement with the wider world. These contrasting attitudes not only shaped the foreign policies of both city-states, but also played a significant role in their respective successes and eventual downfalls. Imagine yourself as a Spartan citizen, living in a society that places a premium on self-sufficiency and independence. Sparta's approach to foreign relations was fundamentally isolationist. The city-state's entire structure, its military dominance, its strict social hierarchy, and its focus on communal living, was designed to preserve the Spartan way of life. Sparta was highly suspicious of external influence, and sought to limit its interactions with other Greek city-states and foreign powers. The Spartans viewed themselves as the guardians of Greek values, and they believed that any external influence could corrupt their society and undermine their military focus. This led to a foreign policy that prioritized the preservation of Sparta's military strength and cultural purity. Sparta's isolationism extended to both its economic and cultural spheres. The city-state's economy was largely self-reliant, relying on the labor of the Helots and a limited amount of trade with other Greek cities. Sparta's emphasis on austerity and simplicity meant that it did not seek to accumulate wealth through trade or conquest, as Athens did. The Spartans were content with their own way of life and saw little need to engage in the broader Mediterranean economy or culture. Their interactions with other city-states were primarily focused on military alliances, such as the Peloponnesian League, which was designed to protect Sparta from external threats and to consolidate its power in the Greek world. The Spartan approach to culture was similarly insular. While Athens was a center of intellectual and artistic achievement, Sparta focused primarily on producing warriors and maintaining military readiness. Spartan art, literature, and philosophy were minimal compared to Athens, which fostered an environment where intellectual thought, drama, and philosophy flourished. The Spartans valued physical strength and military prowess over artistic or intellectual pursuits. This cultural isolation meant that Sparta remained largely disconnected from the broader cultural movements that defined the Greek world, and it lacked the intellectual dynamism of cities like Athens. Spartan culture was designed to serve one purpose: to create the most disciplined and effective military force in the ancient world. In stark contrast, imagine yourself as an Athenian citizen, living in a city-state that is a bustling hub of commerce, culture, and intellectual exchange. Athens, with its open-mindedness and embrace of diversity, took an entirely different approach to foreign relations. The city-state's democracy, with its focus on public participation and civic engagement, was open to ideas and influence from a wide range of sources. Athens was a center of trade, attracting merchants, artisans, and intellectuals from all corners of the Mediterranean. The city's economy was driven by its access to the seas and its ability to control trade routes, making it one of the wealthiest and most cosmopolitan cities in ancient Greece. Athens' openness to foreign influence extended to its cultural and intellectual life as well. The city was home to some of the greatest philosophers, playwrights, and artists of the ancient world. Thinkers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle shaped the course of Western philosophy, while playwrights such as Sophocles, Euripides, and Aristophanes revolutionized theater. The Athenian democracy encouraged public discourse, debate, and intellectual exploration, leading to a vibrant cultural scene that attracted thinkers from across Greece and beyond. Athens' embrace of intellectual freedom and artistic expression made it the cultural capital of the ancient world, and its openness to foreign ideas contributed to the richness of its artistic and intellectual life. Athens' approach to foreign relations was equally expansive. The city-state formed powerful alliances through its leadership of the Delian League, a coalition of Greek city-states created to defend against the Persian Empire. Athens' naval power allowed it to extend its influence over much of the Aegean and beyond. While the Athenians often sought to dominate their allies, they also played a significant role in spreading Athenian culture, art, and ideas throughout the Mediterranean. Athens welcomed foreign traders, intellectuals, and diplomats, and its openness to cultural exchange helped to shape the city's identity as a place of learning, innovation, and progress. However, this openness also had its drawbacks. Athens' pursuit of empire and its aggressive expansionist policies alienated many of its allies and led to tensions within the Delian League. The Athenians, at times, used their naval power to coerce other Greek city-states into submission, leading to resentment and rebellion. This overreach ultimately contributed to the downfall of Athens, as its imperial ambitions stretched it too thin and led to internal strife. The open society that had fostered intellectual and artistic achievement also allowed for political instability and corruption, as democratic ideals were undermined by populism and factionalism. While Athens' openness brought it cultural and intellectual glory, it also left the city vulnerable to the pressures of empire and internal division. As you reflect on the contrasting foreign policies of Sparta and Athens, it becomes clear that each city-state's approach was shaped by its values and priorities. Sparta's isolationism was rooted in its desire to preserve its military superiority and social order. The Spartan system was designed to be self-sufficient, with little interest in external influence or cultural exchange. Sparta's military-focused society was built on the belief that any outside contact could weaken its internal strength and disrupt its rigid social structure. This insular approach served Sparta well in terms of military power, but it left the city-state isolated and vulnerable to the changing dynamics of the Greek world. As the moonlight glows softly on the horizon, we turn our attention to the foreign policies and diplomatic strategies that defined the relationships between Sparta, Athens, and other Greek city-states. These strategies were crucial not only to the survival of each city-state but also to their ability to expand their influence and secure their dominance in the Greek world. While both Sparta and Athens recognized the importance of alliances, their approaches to diplomacy were starkly different, shaped by their respective values and priorities. Imagine yourself in the city of Sparta, where the focus is squarely on military power and self-sufficiency. Spartan diplomacy, by nature, was highly cautious, selective, and often isolated. Sparta's primary concern was preserving its military dominance, and it sought alliances only when absolutely necessary. The Spartan approach to foreign policy was guided by a deep suspicion of outside influences, both cultural and political. Sparta's military power was built on the strength and discipline of its warriors, and the city-state believed that its way of life, its social structure, its education system, its reliance on the helots, was fragile and must be preserved at all costs. Rather than forming wide-ranging alliances, Spartan diplomacy was built around a small group of trusted partners, primarily in the Peloponnesian League, a coalition of Greek city-states led by Sparta. This alliance was formed in response to the growing power of Athens and the perceived threat it posed to the Greek world. Sparta's alliances were largely military in nature, focused on preserving the balance of power in Greece and preventing the expansion of Athens' influence. Spartan diplomacy was often direct, pragmatic, and based on mutual military interests. However, this insular approach meant that Sparta was often unwilling to engage with or understand the broader political and cultural currents of the time. Sparta did not seek to expand its influence beyond its immediate sphere of control and preferred to maintain its isolationist stance. A key example of Spartan diplomacy can be seen during the Peloponnesian War, where Sparta forged an alliance with Persia in order to defeat Athens. Sparta's focus was always on maintaining military supremacy, and this diplomatic alliance with Persia, while unconventional, was a pragmatic decision aimed at countering Athens' naval power. Despite the lack of cultural or ideological common ground, the alliance served Sparta's immediate strategic interests, showing the city-state's willingness to prioritize military goals over long-term political or cultural considerations. In contrast, imagine yourself in Athens, where diplomacy and alliances are seen as integral to the city-state's democratic ideals and intellectual pursuits. Athenian diplomacy was far more expansive, open, and engaged with the broader Greek world. Athens, with its naval supremacy and economic wealth, was keen on forming alliances with various city-states to bolster its power and protect its interests. The city's democratic system, which encouraged political participation and debate, extended to its foreign policy as well. Athenian diplomacy was not just about securing military alliances. It was also about building networks of influence and engaging with other Greek city-states, and even foreign powers, in a way that promoted Athenian values of democracy, freedom, and intellectual achievement. One of the most significant diplomatic ventures of Athens was the formation of the Delian League, a coalition of Greek city-states created in 478 BC after the Persian Wars. The League was originally formed to unite the Greek states against the Persian threat, but under the leadership of Athens, it quickly transformed into an Athenian-dominated empire. Athens used its naval power to protect its allies from external threats, but it also used its influence to demand tribute and political loyalty from the other members of the League. Athens' alliances were based on mutual defense, but also on the idea of spreading Athenian ideals and strengthening the city's position as the cultural and intellectual leader of the Greek world. Unlike Sparta's insular diplomacy, Athens' foreign policy was built on the idea of expanding its influence through alliances, trade, and cultural exchange. The Athenians sought to create a network of allies who could help secure their military position and support their intellectual and cultural endeavors. Athens actively engaged in the affairs of the wider Greek world, participating in debates and forging alliances that were not just based on military power, but on shared cultural and intellectual values. This expansive view of diplomacy reflected Athens' belief in the superiority of its democratic ideals and the importance of engaging with the wider world in a meaningful way. However, this approach to diplomacy was not without its drawbacks. Athens' imperial ambitions led to friction with its allies, particularly those in the Delian League, who resented Athenian control and exploitation of their resources. The Athenians, in their pursuit of power, often imposed their will on their allies, leading to rebellions and tensions within the League. Athens' aggressive expansionist policies eventually contributed to the outbreak of the Peloponnesian War, as Sparta and its allies felt threatened by Athens' growing influence and the city-state's disregard for the interests of other Greek states. As we reflect on the diplomatic approaches of Sparta and Athens, we see how their differing values shaped their foreign policies. Spartan diplomacy was grounded in military pragmatism and caution. The Spartans valued self-sufficiency, and their alliances were formed primarily for the purpose of maintaining their military dominance. Sparta was not interested in cultural exchange or political engagement with other city-states beyond what was necessary to secure its position. This isolationist approach allowed Sparta to maintain its military focus but also made it more vulnerable to changes in the broader political landscape. Athens, on the other hand, embraced diplomacy as a means of expanding its influence, fostering cultural exchange, and promoting its democratic ideals. Athens' alliances were often based on shared values and mutual benefit, and the city-state used its naval power to create a network of political and military ties across the Greek world. While Athens' aggressive foreign policies and imperial ambitions led to its eventual downfall, its approach to diplomacy allowed it to become the cultural and intellectual center of ancient Greece. The contrasting diplomatic approaches of Sparta and Athens highlight the differences in their societies. Sparta, with its focus on military discipline and isolation, and Athens, with its emphasis on democracy, intellectual engagement, and cultural expansion. While both city-states sought to secure their place in the Greek world, they did so in fundamentally different ways, and their foreign policies were shaped by the values that defined their identities. Ultimately, Sparta's diplomacy was marked by a desire to maintain military dominance and preserve its way of life, while Athens' diplomacy was driven by the desire to expand its influence, spread its cultural ideals, and strengthen its democratic system. These contrasting approaches to foreign relations provide insight into the broader values and priorities of the two city-states, and their differing visions for the future of Greece. As the night sky glistens with stars, we come to the final chapter of our journey through the ancient worlds of Sparta and Athens, reflecting on the remnants of these once mighty city-states. Today, both Sparta and Athens have left behind a profound archaeological legacy that continues to shape our understanding of the ancient Greek world. These ruins, monuments, and artifacts offer us a window into the lives of those who lived and fought in these cities, allowing us to draw connections between their past glories and the world we live in today. However, as we stand in the shadows of the past, we are reminded that these cities, despite their grandeur, ultimately succumb to the forces of time and change, and their once powerful civilizations are but echoes of a bygone era. Imagine yourself standing atop the Acropolis in Athens, gazing out over the city and the surrounding hills. The Parthenon, the crowning jewel of Athenian architecture, still stands proudly atop this ancient hill. Though time has taken its toll on the structure, through centuries of wear, conflict, and even the ravages of war, the Parthenon remains a symbol of Athens' cultural and intellectual legacy. It is here, in the heart of Athens, that the ideals of democracy, philosophy, and artistic achievement were born. The Parthenon is more than just a temple dedicated to Athena. It is a testament to the grandeur of Athenian society, to its commitment to knowledge, and to its unyielding pride in its cultural and artistic achievements. As you walk through the Agora, the bustling center of public life in Athens, you can almost hear the echoes of the great philosophers and orators who once walked these streets. The ruins of ancient buildings, including the Stoa of Attalos and the Temple of Hephaestus, give us a glimpse into the vibrant public life of Athens, where democracy was practiced, where intellectual debates took place, and where the foundations of Western civilization were laid. The Athenian Agora was the heart of the city, a place where citizens gathered to discuss politics, philosophy, and the future of their society. It was here that Socrates taught, Plato founded his academy, and the ideas of democracy and justice were debated in public forums. The archaeological legacy of Athens is not just confined to monumental buildings and ruins, it is also found in the art and artifacts that have survived the passage of time. Sculptures, pottery, and inscriptions from ancient Athens provide a glimpse into the daily lives of its citizens, offering insight into the cultural, religious, and intellectual pursuits that shaped Athenian society. The ancient theaters, such as the Theater of Dionysus, where plays by Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides were first performed, still stand as testaments to the city's commitment to drama, art, and public performance. The city's commitment to intellectual exploration and artistic creation continues to resonate today, with Athens serving as a cultural capital and a symbol of human achievement. In contrast, imagine yourself standing in the rugged, windswept plains of Laconia, near the ruins of ancient Sparta. The once mighty city-state of Sparta, with its military power and austere values, has left behind far less visible evidence of its greatness. Unlike Athens, which left behind grand monuments to its cultural and intellectual achievements, the remnants of Sparta are sparse and modest. The ruins of ancient Sparta are scattered across the landscape, with only a few key sites offering us insight into its once powerful society. The ruins of the ancient theater, the remains of the temple of Artemis Orthia, and the Spartan tombs at Thermopylae are among the few enduring reminders of the city-state that once dominated the Greek world. The lack of monumental structures in Sparta is a reflection of the city-state's values. Unlike Athens, where art and intellectual achievement were central to the city's identity, Sparta was focused on military discipline, strength, and communal living. The Spartans did not invest in grand public works or artistic expression. Instead, they prioritized military readiness and the strength of their warriors. As a result, the archaeological record of Sparta is much more austere and utilitarian than that of Athens. The simplicity of Spartan life, and the focus on military training and social conformity, is reflected in the remnants of the city-state's physical remains. Yet, despite the scarcity of monumental architecture, the legacy of Sparta endures. The site of the Battle of Thermopylae, where King Leonidas and his 300 Spartans made their legendary stand against the Persian army, is one of the most important historical sites in Greece. The simplicity of the Spartan tombs at Thermopylae, with their understated markers, speaks volumes about the Spartan ethos of sacrifice for the greater good of the state. The Spartan legacy is not found in grand monuments or artistic masterpieces but in the stories of courage, discipline, and self-sacrifice that have become immortalized in the annals of history. As we compare the archaeological legacies of Sparta and Athens, we see that the contrast between the two cities is mirrored in their physical remains. Athens, with its grand monuments, intellectual achievements, and vibrant cultural life, left behind a legacy of art, philosophy, and democracy. The city's monuments, temples, and artifacts serve as a testament to the greatness of Athenian civilization and its profound influence on the development of Western thought and culture. Athens' ruins are a symbol of its intellectual and cultural supremacy, and they continue to inspire awe and admiration to this day. In contrast, Sparta's archaeological legacy is one of simplicity, austerity, and military strength. The remnants of Sparta speak to the city-state's focus on military discipline and communal living, with its modest tombs, sparse ruins, and lack of monumental architecture. Sparta's legacy is not one of artistic achievement or intellectual exploration, but of strength, unity, and sacrifice. The Spartan way of life, though ultimately unable to withstand the changing tides of history, continues to resonate as a symbol of courage and discipline. Both Sparta and Athens have left us with a rich archaeological legacy, but these legacies reflect the very different priorities and values of their societies. Athens' monuments speak to its commitment to intellectual and artistic achievement, while Sparta's ruins remind us of the power of discipline, military strength, and self-sacrifice for the collective good. These contrasting legacies offer us a window into the worlds of two of ancient Greece's most influential city-states, and allow us to reflect on the enduring influence they continue to have on our understanding of the ancient world.